Mr. Burgess Meredith is no stranger to the Twilight Zone, but his role in next week's story is a unique one even for him. The time will be the future, the place just about anywhere where men have been taken over by a machine state. Our story is called The Obsolete Man. It may chill, it may provoke, but we're rather certain it'll leave a mark. Next week on the Twilight Zone, The Obsolete Man.
I kind of feel called out right now. Just a bit.
Are you pre-chilled?
Yeah, a little bit.
You are frightened. You're thrilled. You're shaken. You're stirred.
Kind of. I think the only kind of clue we get here to the episode type is the sort of the overarching. Seems like there's some government body at work or some sort of what's the word tyrannical regime at work here. So I'm that's kind of.
Well, I'm getting big, like you guy who's only seen Star Trek vibes. Like, I'm getting really big Star Trek vibes from this.
I tell you what, I'm going to give you guys some help before we rate, because the letters have been pouring in from the Holodeck sponsors. They're upset that our pre-ratings aren't matching the final rate. They don't want to be tied up in false advertising, so we're going to try to sync these up. So I'm going to describe the next 25 minutes of your life in perfect detail before you rate this. You ready?
I'm ready.
So, all right.
Hit me with it.
You've just entered a food eating contest. If you can eat it in 30 minutes, it's free. Have you ever seen those on TV?
Yeah.
The waiter brings you a 72-ounce porterhouse steak, sets it down in front of you, grabs the steak with both hands and wallops you across the face with it. 20 minutes of chewing later, your jaw is aching. You're getting the meat sweats. You become feverishly delirious. The waiters come up, grab you by the arms, haul you out of the restaurant, and toss you into the street. And that's what's going to happen in the next 25 minutes. So based on that...
It's like my normal Saturday. What are you talking about? I pay very good money for this kind of treatment.
Okay. Don't know how to feel about that.
I feel like this is an allegory for
it's
something.
It's going to be shockingly accurate, by the way. Once you get to the end, you're going to be like, oh, you're right.
Is this man obsolete because he's a vegetarian or something? Is this going to be where we go?
Somehow don't think that's it.
I don't know.
All right, I'll throw myself on the grenade, and guess what? I've my estimation of Rod Serling only goes up with every episode I watch. I would say probably a pre-rating of a 7. I feel like that's just a safe. No, you know what? We got called out for that last week. Yeah, it's a banned number, not allowed. 7.005. All right, fine. I'll bump up to a 7.5. Guess what? I trust Maselli to put out a television of quality. That's what he claims to have done in that interview we watched. I believe in him. 7.5.
He only produces quality television. I'll go... I don't know. I'm feeling like there's a little bit of apprehension coming through in Auto's words here. I'm feeling like there's something we should be curious about. I feel like that description's a little bit of a metaphor for how he felt about the episode. So I'm going to.
I mean, that could be a good thing, though.
That could be a good thing. I'm gonna go for my lower score. Yeah, I'm going to go for a 4. I'm going to say I might not enjoy this one as much. I don't know. We'll see. Dan,
I'm already excited for Burgess Meredith. He's one of the actors that's transcended his era. You've probably seen him, especially if you ever had to sit through the film adaptation of Mice and Men in grade school. But more than that, he's been on Batman, and he's just if you've watched TV of the era, you've probably seen him at some point, and he always delivers. More than that, I've heard. I don't know this episode. I've never seen it. I'm familiar with the title, though. It comes up all the time if you are doing any sort of searching or researching for the Twilight Zone. I think we're in for a treat, and I'm gonna go to a 9.
Ooh.
Wow. We got some nice spread here. We got 4, 5, and 9. Yeah.
I've noticed, Dan, that actually your pre-ratings do line up very closely with your final one. So you're the good barometer.
Go on, Otto. Speaking of barometers,
I declined to pre-rate this one. However. Anything that has Burgess Meredith is an automatic 7. That's the baseline for Burge, I will say.
No one can pick 7s except me.
So what you're
saying that's the baseline.
It
could be better than that.
Okay.
What you're saying is that you're on the verge of something great?
Well, on that terrible pun,
good.
Let's go and watch the episode.
Thank you.
This is the dimension of imagination. It is an area which we call the Twilight Zone.
Welcome to the Holodeck, our adventure through things that are non-Trek, and on this particular program we are running the Twilight Zone, and we are now on to episode 29 of season 2, The Obsolete Man, where, well, the question of whether a man's literary right to exist depends on, well, the eye of the beholder, it seems. Otto, tell us, why did you pick this particular episode for us in our chain of viewings?
I like that you guys are smiling now. This is going to be the most upbeat this video will be. All right, there's going to be some adult discussions about religion, about politics, and so, you know, we're going to tackle this. And if you guys have been with us this far on the watch along, I hope you'll stick with us. I think this is an important episode. Why did I pick it though? Very reductive. Burgess Meredith. I love Burge. He's great in everything. And so I'd watched this originally just in the corner while I was doing something else. And so when it was time to pick episodes, I picked Burgess, but I had an inkling that there was something important about that episode. And so it almost made the cut. In the notes, it said in parentheses, may skip. And I'm glad that I went back and picked it. So.
And in this episode, we see one Mr. Wordsworth being dragged in front of a very dystopian state. I mean, that is not at all missed over at any point. There is definitely even direct references to Hitler and Stalin from the minister of this certain state, and he gets dragged in and told he is obsolete. There is no need for librarians in this glorious Reich, as it were, and being told that this is. No function for him in this world anymore. But I thought I quite like the clever part of this, which is him being able to give enough lenience to say, I would like to choose the method of my assassination. I thought that was the bit that kind of gave me a bit of pause for thought on that one. What do you guys think?
Well, I think that's just sort of like a bit of a narrative, like way for the victim of the state to get his like muppets on the, because otherwise it's a case of, well, this would be a much more depressing story, because this is a relatively uplifting one if you think about it in terms of like what actually happens. Although I know it's uplifting in a depressing way. It's one of those weird
in
ones.
A dystopian way, definitely.
They blew up Mickey. That's not a great ending.
I was surprised that they actually let the bomb go. That's the kind of thing you'd think they just do to build suspense. They blew a guy up on TV. So there you go.
Yeah. Well, you didn't see any blood. You didn't see any gore, so it's fine. It's all fine, folks. He's like lying down on the floor. It's all good. But yeah, like we were making the joke, and we're gonna make the joke in every goddamn episode. I feel like, guess what? A subtext is for cowards, and it kind of is. I feel like Rod Serling
this one especially.
would see that Garth. We would see Garth bring a bit, and he'd go, "Yes, no, I agree, 100%. Subtext is for cowards." Like subtext is great because it allows you to be subtle, right? It allows you to not beat people over the head, which people hate. Except that it also allows people to miss the point. And that's how you get people who are racists or homophobes in the Star Trek fandom. That's how you end up getting people who don't understand, the Empire or the bad guys in Star Wars, because subtext, right? Even though that is also not very subtextual. But Rod Serling is clear of the school of thought: if I don't take this stick and hit you over the head with it, you won't get it.
For the most important parts, I agree with you. But we've had some fun with prior episodes, though, having a difference of opinion about what the episode's actually trying to deliver.
Yeah.
Where that negative space where we are trying to fill in the blanks has really led to some interesting conclusions. So this one, he's taken a completely different turn, though. He's trying to deliver a message, and the fact that he has a post log at the end where he gets on and really just kind of make sure that we all understand what we just saw. When I wonder, it's a little unusual. He usually has a little voiceover at the end, but he reappeared again, so this is a little bit of a difference. Just to make sure that we understand that he was the one that was trying to deliver this message to us, that this was important to him. So this clearly was something from the heart.
We're going to talk about it in. We're going to have a little bit of a Rod Serling retrospective if it's not already been up, but we are going to talk a little bit about Rod Serling's history in the serving in the army and fighting in World War II is going to be a big part of his reflections and his writing influences, definitely.
So you mentioned, I'm going to steal your job idol because I know you're so enraptured by this. You mentioned they show him in the epilogue. This is one of 3 times in Twilight Zone that they do it. And actually was cut down for broadcast. The original scripted epilogue is as follows. The Chancellor, the late Chancellor, is only partly correct. He was obsolete, but so is the state, the entity he worshipped. Any state, entity, or ideology becomes obsolete when it stockpiles the wrong weapons, when it captures territories but not minds, when it enslaves millions but convinces nobody, when it is naked yet puts on armor and calls it faith, while in the eyes of God it has no faith at all. Any state, any entity, any ideology that fails to recognize the worth, the dignity, the rights of man, that state is obsolete. A case to be filed under M for Mankind in Twilight Zone. Like, if you thought the episode was meaty, that was... So I actually prefer the cut down line because I think it puts the cut down epilogue. I think it puts the emphasis on the right line, a great line. Any state, entity, or ideology that fails to recognize the worth of man, the dignity of man, is obsolete. So,
Although I kind of like the expanded version because it really drills down on the themes of the episode of fascism as an inherently cowardly state of politics. Because Mr. Wordsworth very eloquently puts it, you wouldn't be here if you weren't afraid of me in some respect. Like, you can act like you're some kind of benevolent state here to be with me in my final moments. You can be here trying to break me, as it were. But the only reason you're actually here is because fascism only works if people are afraid. And the instant that he shows that he's not afraid in the courtroom, it's like, okay, this is a problem. I have to take care of it in the other way. And that line about, the state that puts on armor but it is completely just naked and vulnerable, that's fascism. That's what that is. And I kind of like that expanded speech. I feel like that's but both of them work in very good ways, but as you say, they have very different emphases on what you want to take away from the episode. But I like that expanded one.
I was quite surprised when they actually turned around, because I thought this was going to be sort of like old future. I mean, it is kind of like old future kind of thing, but I was very surprised when he actually turned around. The glorious leader turned around and said, like, oh yes, Hitler and Stalin, they didn't go far enough. We've got all these. I was like, oh, we are going to literally draw that line, and this is the point we're making. This has some very real parallels to 2024. Like, there are things going on in the world that I look at this episode and I go, yeah, this is still a thing, unfortunately. Like, we haven't grown out of that kind of bigotry and hatred. We're getting there, but there is still a real divide, and there are certain people that
the
would
erasures
like that.
of certain people. Yeah,
there are definitely those people that would love that man standing on his podium and shouting at people about how we should be obsolete and this glorious society should be led by certain dictates. But it's unfortunately, it is not the case.
All right, I want to shout out Act 1, which might be my favorite act in Twilight Zone. All right, let me read some quotes. I'm going to be doing a lot of reading, so, grab a nappy and a sippy cup, and I'm going to put you guys to sleep. This is just in the first 6 minutes. But like every one of the super states that preceded it, it has one iron rule: logic as an enemy and truth as a menace. Request clarification on the term. Yes, the term, Mr. Wordsworth, you people. You make reference to the state. You guys laughed when that line came up.
You people.
You cannot erase God with an edict. I'm a human being. I exist, and if I speak one thought aloud, that thought lives even after I'm shoveled into my grave. And my favorite line, delusions, Mr. Wordsworth, delusions that you inject into your veins with printer's ink, the narcotics that you call literature, the Bible, poetry, essays, all kinds, all of it an opiate to make you think you have a strength when you have no strength at all. He's actually unintentionally complimenting literature here. I love that literature gives us strength. When we see, like you talked about in I the Beholder, Stars, when you see representation of yourself in media, it gives you strength. It makes you feel like you're not alone. So I like that he didn't realize how much he was complimenting. And then you get Burgess and I should have looked this guy's name up. You get these two actors thundering away at each other, and it's so much fun. Something you may not have noticed. While the Chancellor's thundering away at this obsolete librarian, he's got this massive book in front of him that he's reading from, and he hates books. So just a fantastic first act, subtext or not, I don't care. I loved it.
I think
guess what? Like when we bring that up, it's not really a disparagement. It's more just a case of, guess what? It takes balls to go without subtext. It takes balls to be like, no, I'm going to present the themes to you like this, and I'm going to trust that I present them to you in such a fashion that you don't feel like you're being talked down to. You don't feel like you're being insulted. You and I, the writer and the audience are on an even keel as to this is a conversation we need to have, and you need to understand what I have to say.
Yeah,
That's what it means when you take away the subtext. It's like you're putting trust in the audience that they'll go along with you.
it's refreshing, really, in a way, because so many like TV shows and like other literary pieces, like they tend to sort of kind of hide it behind a load of like world building or a load of faff or kind of like thinly veiled dialogue. This literally just comes out and says what it wants to say about, literally the interpretation of the state on God, the interpretation of the state on a man's own rights, and what they have, and how little they value life itself. Literally just turns around and says, like, you're going to get executed. You're not needed anymore. You go and choose how you want to die. See you later. And we'll film it as an example. It's I kind of find that refreshing in a way.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, Wordsworth's character also a little bit of credit to the brilliance of Burgess Meredith inhabiting the character here, more than just the readings. His performance in the first act, where he enters the room and immediately, just the moment you get a really quick, maybe a half-second look at his face, instantly relatable. Everybody has the kindly old grandfather they can see in this character. But then when he appears at the beginning of the table with no advocate, no lawyer, and he has to defend himself, and there's a realization that comes across his face when he realizes the opportunity, and he can't possibly parse the legal language. We pointed out that you people define you people and define obsolete, and there's all this structure that's set up that the state relies upon that he has no way of competing on those terms. So he has found a way to play three-dimensional chess and find a way to bring the terms back to himself, which leads to the second act. But it's fascinating how, with just the script that he was given, he's able to bring us along, and we know by the end of his stand at the table that he's got something up his sleeves, and it's a fantastic lead-in.
Yeah, it's
one of these things where it's like I love librarians in fiction because they're so often I
love him in real life, by the way, too.
My wife is a librarian, so.
Hey.
Well, guess what? I volunteered as a librarian in my school library, and I did like a year's worth of like library work. I did my job experience in the library. I love libraries. Libraries
I too
are
have
amazing.
visited a library.
I don't believe you.
A library?
A library.
A library.
And it's like, librarians are a certain type of person. You have to have a certain infinite kind of patience. You have to have a certain formidableness to you because you have to fight for you have to fight for funding. You have to fight against children. You have to fight against people who are like you have to learn how to pick your fights and learn when to give way. And you are, in your way, no matter what kind of librarian you are, whether you're a librarian in like a legal archive or if you're in like a kindergarten or whatever, you are in your way a guardian of knowledge. You are in your way a pathway for people to learn.
Dan's writing this all down very frantically. Right, I can tell this to my wife on our next date night. Yeah.
Honey, did you know?
You're a guardian of knowledge. And
behold.
It's like behold. And it's almost like, I think, there is a degree to which Wordsworth is outmatched by the state. He can't compete on these terms because he is just one man. He is obsolete not just in the fact that the state has decided he is no longer needed, but also in case of his power is such that it's insignificant. But I almost feel like, asking for the definition of the terms is just kind of like him making a political statement almost of like, speak it out loud. Don't with like fascism and so, especially in like 1984, you think of like the way that they cloak the way that they talk about things, and they don't, and they dance around in the poeticism. Yeah, exactly. And it's a very librarian thing to go, no, what do you mean? State these in the bold spate thing so that everyone here knows exactly what you're saying. And then because that's a standard rhetorical way of arguing is, and I did also look this up. Rod Serling was on the debate team at his university when he was younger, and he would have known this.
No surprise there.
Yeah, are you shocked? And guess what? A standard rhetorical device is making your opponent state the terms of their argument so that you can go in on them and pick them apart at the seams. And like, I feel like Wordsworth is very much overwhelmed, and I think Meredith does an extremely good job of playing that off. But he gives him this like incredible spine where like you get to see the waver and then snap back, and that's just immediately endearing as a character, while still making him real and feel like a formidable force. I really appreciate him in this episode.
I want to call out a few small details. One of them I already did, the fact that Chancellor's reading from a book as he's condemning books. You probably noticed the assistant has replaced the Chancellor at the end.
Yes.
Wordsworth has the same occupation as Jesus Christ, a carpenter. So I'm sure that was intentional. So I have a kind of a reductive question for you, but it's not a trick question. And you can only pick one. Who's the main character of this episode?
Ooh. It's I want to say Wordsworth, but I feel like
It is arguably the Chancellor, because he's the one who undergoes an emotional transformation and learns something.
Yeah. I feel like if you're going to talk a protagonist, obviously it's Wordsworth, but the main star is a different thing. I do love, like, just sort of going off topic of this, like I do love shows that are bold enough to just go, here's two men in a room, and this is gripping. The whole way through, I was looking at the clock and I thought, I feel like I've been watching this for half an hour already, and it's only been 10 minutes. Like, it's enrapturing. I love shows that do that. 12 Angry Men is exactly the same. Just put people in the room and have them talk about such an engaging topic in black and white, in basically a thrown-up library on the set that's probably as cheap as chips, and it's so engaging. I love stuff like that. I love that. I feel like... No, this is going to sound real dumb, but I'm reading a book with my eyes. Like, I'm literally reading a conversation, but does that make sense? Do you know what I mean? Like,
because the details are so stark that you could see them in black and white ink. That's the thing.
Yeah, exactly.
And I want to circle back, actually, because here's the thing. I feel almost certain that Rod Serling has read the Communist Manifesto, and I feel like he knows Karl Marx, because, like, that mention, I love the poeticism of, like, you inject printer's ink into your veins like a narcotic, and all I could think of was Marx talking about religion as the opiate of the masses, and that felt like I'm not sure if that was intentionally like that, but like given that he name checks like Stalin as well as Hitler, like in attacking communism on that as well, but having that same kind, because this is a very this is a fascist future, but it is not a uniquely Hitlerian future. It's not the Third or Fourth Reich.
It's post, isn't it? It's very post takeover. Everything's they've won basically, and this is the
and it's like the elimination of religion as well is very much more a communist thing than it is a fascist thing specifically. Although obviously there's depending on your definition of Stalinism, it's very much the same thing. But I just appreciated that as like a commentary, but it didn't go in for strong iconography. Like, I feel like if you made this nowadays, they would not have been able to stop themselves from having some kind of vaguely swastika or hammer and sickle. Not obviously those symbols, but they would have gone with something as obvious as that behind the Chancellor dominating the room. But they didn't go for that. Instead, they just went for little subtle things like the little checker pattern on his shirt, which I was like,
I wonder if that's more
just something.
I mean, I wonder if that's a case of where the budget's kind of saved them. Like, they don't have the budget to make like big scenery things. I think if they did, they would have. But actually, it kind of works that they didn't.
It's two sets.
Exactly.
They could have spent more money on this, but I feel like they were smart and they were like, no, we need to make this as pointed and obvious a future, but also non-specific in those specific, because fascism is like that. I like that about it.
The iconography may not have been there, but the set slapped you in the face.
Oh yeah,
Wordsworth's room, pillar post, books everywhere, just piles of books. I actually noticed on the second watch, I've only watched it twice before, there's actually just like a pile, there's like a prop in the room, and they drew lines on it to make it look like a stack of books. It wasn't even books. So like they didn't even get the books, but they wanted you to think there's books. And then that first act, the door that extends into infinity, you called it the Putin's table, that's so long. The giant ladder that he must have had to climb to get on the Chancellor's podium. Like, the iconography wasn't there, but the sets absolutely made you feel a certain way.
Actually, the desk is just a big seesaw, and they just counterbalance, and he does a triple gainer up to the top. So I'll point out, you made a good comment, Idle, about the iconography. So in addition to the checkerboard pattern, the chessboard pattern, perhaps on the Chancellor's outfit, prominently in the room there was what looked like a knight, a chess knight, and it could have had some other connotations as well. I guess Reader's Digest had a Pegasus as its icon, so that's a popular image from of the day, and something that a carpenter who was also a librarian might produce. But the fact that there was certainly an element of him trying to be one step ahead of the chancellor. Um, I think despite the disarray, that's how disarming he really was. We talk about the fact that we have a librarian here who really just lives in clutter. And we also can think about librarians, though, as being archivists and organizers. And so this draws us to the question of what's most important to Wordsworth here. He eschews, he criticizes the chancellor for their order and their rigor. But, how would one find the right book if they needed to in his apartment? And so I guess that brings us to the real main character to answer your question. Idol is,
Thank you.
so it could be God. It could be the idea of God or a higher power. And so that imagery is also in the episode where the higher power, the chancellor, has literally positioned himself as the higher power in the room, being 15 feet above everybody else. But also the fact that for a good 3 or 4 minutes of the episode, the only dialogue is Psalm 23:4.
Yeah.
So they're giving an awful lot of airtime to somebody here, and so if not from that, then who?
I think it's
But we do.
it's a very relatable things, especially in the time of airing, where you very much got like the red versus blue. You got the communists on one side, and then you very much got a God-fearing country as well. Having him being the blue collar, nuclear family, Sunday worshipping, essentially is the protagonist for that metric, and people can relate to that, understandably so. May not appeal to every demographic these days, but for the 1960s, definitely that would have been a hit at home for just in terms of how relatable he'd been for people that are looking at him.
This episode, I want to call out two different quotes that come to mind, both of them from Friedrich Nietzsche. The first is "God is dead."
Yeah.
And the second is those who do not study history are condemned to repeat it.
Yeah.
Both of those fit pretty firmly in here.
Cannot
So there's
replace
some
God
ideology.
with an edict is the one I picked out, and I was just like, yeah, because I think that
very good,
you
yes.
cannot replace God with an edict is also like you can replace the God with anything, any kind of, because it's not particularly God they're erasing or anything like that. It is more the idea of someone to pursue an ideology, or the idea of someone to pursue something outside of the state's red lines and say, hey, you can do this. So they're not saying, oh yeah, no, you can't erase God with an edict. You can't erase this personal freedom of yourself with an edict. You can't just say this is true and it applies. Sorry, go on, Otto, you're itching.
What?
Dan, hang on to that quote, God is dead, because it's going to come back later today. Maybe not this video, but today.
Right.
You ask what matters most to Wordsworth, and I went down the rabbit hole on this episode the last couple days preparing stuff, and I came across a quote that I couldn't quite parse. So I sent it to Stars yesterday. I asked, help me figure this one out. He says, it's been hidden here for over 20 years, talking about his Bible. It's a crime punishable by death, so it's the only possession that I have that has any value at all to me. What is inherent about the fact that it's so taboo and illicit that's what makes it the most important thing to him? And I can't, as a straight white man who slides by in society, I couldn't relate anything in my own life. I couldn't parse that. What illicit part of me that is not valued by the state would I hold so dear that I would proclaim it's the only possession I have that has any value? So we went around a little bit on that, but anyone have an opinion on that?
Yeah, I think it's more the case of like it because it is illegal and it is something that is precious to him that it feels so good. He's holding on to his religion like it is part of his life. It is essentially is part of what makes him is his religion, because it is made illegal. He has now have this thing that it matters more to him that has been made illegal because of his opinions as well about the state, which he's very vocal about. Like I said earlier, you cannot erase God with an edict. You cannot just hand down these truths and say they are so. He's taken that to heart, and it's willful defiance, that he knows he is on the right side of God for, and the right side of of humanity for. So he treasures that. It's worth more than his life. It's worth defiance of the state. It's worth people's individual liberties. I feel that's kind of what that meant for me.
So I actually want to jump in on this a little bit because, I feel like there's almost a degree here of, maybe this is me reading too much into it, but they call him a librarian, and Dan, you correctly point out that his room is not in order. Now, I don't know if you can see this, but back here I've got a collection of comic books all down there, right? And they're in chronological order. I put them in that order myself because guess what? I need to be able to find the stuff I want to find. Except that there's stuff that I've taken out and put in different places because it's more important to me. And I almost wonder if librarian is not a mistranslation, but a direct misattribution of what he actually is, which is a collector of books, i.e., a collector of human viewpoints, a collector of thoughts and passions and feelings,
ideas.
And it was exactly, and therefore, so who is he put this in order for? He's put it in order for himself. He knows exactly where everything goes. Like if you ask me, where's your copy of the Darth Phoenix Saga? Oh, it's right there. I literally know it's right up there. I don't even have to look. I know, because it's important to me. Like that was the first comic book I ever read. I know exactly where it is. But anyone else would struggle to find it because I'm not a librarian in here. I am. This is for my personal use. And then it got me thinking about the Bible, because this thing you mentioned. Oh, God is being given a lot of airtime here, except that obviously the Bible is the transcribed word of God, but it's also a collection of books in and of itself. And it's also, in its way, a historical document and a collection of voices and a collection of conversations about humanity and morality and about all of these things. It is not just the word of God. It's a conversation about God and what he means and what could arguably be more human than that. Because it's not just the Ten Commandments. It's a list of, well, what does that mean in practice? What do these parables mean? What do these morals mean? And that's why it's a case of like all of these ideas and words have meaning outside of being ascribed to God because they are a collection of humanity as well. And that's why I think they probably went with the Bible, because it's the most obvious. This is not just a divine thing, but it's also an artifact of humanity.
All right, I want to shout out someone because I am the dumbest one of the group, undeniably, and so I take things generally at face value, and then I have to chew on that steak for a while. So I want to call out typical humanoid, a Reddit user made a comment some years ago, because I don't like the Christian aspect of it. My father is a pastor. I went to church last week, in fact, so I have a history with religion, let's say, but I didn't like it being used here because in the annals of history, if you have a state in power that is going to marginalize free thinking and reading material and that kind of thing, more than likely it's going to have a religious aspect to it. But this person said, I think it's because most modern viewers don't take kindly to the secular state being antagonistic toward the Christian hero of Wordsworth. I certainly had my fair share of objections to that, as if it isn't usually the other way around, especially back then. But Serlin's concluding monologue rescues the episode. Any state, entity, ideology which fails to recognize the worth and dignity of man, the state is obsolete. It makes it seem like the episode is just one example of a corrupt system, and that what each side believes doesn't matter, yet perhaps this was done because audiences back then wouldn't have gotten behind a non-theistic hero. So, I think it was to appeal to A, the viewers, maybe B, the what do they call it, sponsors. And so even though it chafed me, the Twilight Zone is made up of infinite number of universes, and I think this is just one look at who's running the state and what they value.
I think in terms of whether they, because I am atheist / agnostic, as in I don't know, don't care. I just have a kind of a view that something's out there, I'm living my life anyway. So, I have had a history where I've been very anti-religious. I've softened a lot on that, in my recent years as I've got older and realised that, there's good and bad on both sides. I think them using the Bible here is fine. I think an apt... I like it in terms of just them using it as a tool for showing how people's freedoms have been stripped away. You can't worship in private, you can't have your own beliefs even if they are non-harming. I feel like using that as a relatable for white Western audiences, definitely for the times as well. It is a little bit, obviously if this played in certain other countries, you'd probably have the Quran or Buddha's Bible or whatever. Sorry, if my lack of other religious knowledge is terrible, but it fits the bill. I feel like, yeah, if they'd have used anything else to illustrate that point, it may not have been as hard hitting, especially at the time, because I can't think of anything that's had a more wider, for better or for worse, a wider sociable impact than the Bible to illustrate a point.
It'd be tough if what he kept locked away for 20 years in his vault was the copy of the Dark Phoenix saga. Yeah. Sorry, Stars, but just wouldn't have the same impact.
It's just Playboy magazine. Look at Marilyn Monroe. How could you not?
So this kind of leads us into how Wordsworth won, right? Because he's had to keep these ideas locked up. There's been transgressions. He's still allowed to own books, just not a specific book. And in the end, the way that he wins is he's able to take this banned literature, and on a global, hungry platform where people are bloodthirsty and ready to watch a man die, he's able to fully read from something that gives him comfort. And you notice he's a carpenter, but he didn't fashion a cross. There's no religious iconography anywhere in his apartment. Whether or not that would have gotten him rendered obsolete for for transgressions earlier, but he doesn't have that inside his vault either. No imagery, just the book. Speaking to he finds real value not in worship, not in blind obedience like we see with the zombies at the end of Act 3, but he finds comfort in the ideas and the moral stars, like you said, where there is there's something greater that he needs to share because people have lost touch with it.
Yeah, and it's especially like that. What was it? Psalms 23:4. It's about finding comfort in dark places. Like that's literally what it's about. Like the instant I heard it, I was like, oh, Samuel L. Jackson did it better. But that's just a joke. It's like when you actually read that passage, it is quite comforting. It is all about like finding comfort in dark places and of a belief in something greater than yourself, even if it doesn't have to be God. It can still just be like the belief in another human being, or the totality of humanity, some kind of numinous reality, like or some kind of belief in just like the cosmic majesty. Like there could be anything. It doesn't have to be specifically God.
And it's for anybody. If you notice the Chancellor's words at the climax of the story, when he's begging, after hand-wringing, and then after pleading, just like he said Wordsworth would be doing, his final words before Wordsworth agrees to unlock the door for him are "for the love of God."
Which I chewed on this ending for quite a while because I rewrote the ending for our last 5, and I want to turn it into a table read later to do something a little bit different. And I couldn't get a satisfying way for him to get out of the box. Because, if you take religion out of it, what is it gonna? For the love of books, let me out of here. Now that doesn't make sense. He's praying to the higher power, yes. And even if you replace it, in the name of the state, let me out. It doesn't work. It's got to be God for him, for this emotional climax, for him to let him out of the room. I think so.
Well, it's also a case of it could just be if you said in the name of God, any God, because it's a case of the higher power or a higher power, just like. The idea of any power higher than the state is ideally what he needs to get him to reveal there.
Okay.
For the love of Pete.
love
Pete
of O'Reilly.
This doesn't hit the same. Hit that hard, right? Okay. Carpenter, another carpenter, right?
Little did we know that the carpenter is the actual foundation of society, and frickin' Wordsworth and Pete Van Horn were just knocking together furniture back in the day.
Yeah, that's what they were doing. Anyway, let's move on to our... Bread. Yes, thank you, Mr. Brooks. We will... Mr. Brooks? Avery Brooks? Yes? No?
Mr. Avery Brooks.
No, that was right. Had a weird...
of the star of one of the best Star Trek series ever made.
No, I just had a thing in my head that just everything melted. Anyway, on to...
In the name of God, Idol, could you get this right once, please?
Never. I'm shook from all this subtext rocking my soul. Yes, moments that stood out to you in this episode. Otto, please start us off. What was the moment that stood out to you most of all in this episode?
So clear, that door that stretches to infinity. I love that. I was looking for a seam. I was looking for trying to figure out if they did something with scale and shot it like double exposure or something. That door that stretched to infinity. And then I realized on the second watch, the Putin table is so funny too. But the what they do with length and dimension in that scene, because they they don't have props really or iconography or it's very Spartan, but that door and the table and the so. Bread. Sorry, I gotta say bread every time we do this.
Dan, what is your bread?
Oh,
sorry.
Yeah, so it's the image of the chancellor being dragged down the very table that he was using to judge everybody else, and now he's being keelhauled across it. And especially the chef's kiss is the Dutch angle at the very end when he's dragged off onto the floor and consumed by the state zombies, state sponsored zombies. Is that going to be our grade this week, anyways?
It's your turn. Stars.
I was gonna mention the fucking freaky ass noise they started making when they're about to tear them apart like hungry hyenas.
What was that about?
Guess what? That's what fascist frothing at the mouth sounds like. I guess. So guess what? It's a pretty good representation of it. I think it's probably just gonna be the image of the Chancellor just slowly losing his mind and going from the perfectly prim, just like I got my hair slicked back to just like that subtle little quave in his hair. The slow losing of composure, the clocks going. Guess what? I'm a fucking sucker for the iconography of clocks going across the screen, a timer on the screen. That also, but it's just like there is no greater narrative device than a ticking clock. There is a inherent danger. There is an inherent excitement. There's an inherent tension to the ticking clock, and guess what? I talked about that Alfred Hitchcock thing, and I'm so glad that it literally came home to roost right here. I love that. So happy about that.
My bread.
Idle. What about you?
Hey, what about me? I kind of got two breads. This edition. I kind of like. First off, is the line my first one is the line. Death is the great equalizer. And I kind of love that line, just throwing out, death is the great equalizer. It doesn't matter whether you're head of the state or just a mere librarian or anything. At the end of the day, we're all going to be on the same level playing field. And I kind of love that. And I think that might have been one of the words that kind of got through to kind of the head of state that made him maybe almost break, that kind of goes like, oh yeah, hang on, I'm going to be nothing at the end of this. So, because he doesn't believe in God. He doesn't believe in an afterlife. So why would he? For him, it's just done, lights out, gone. The other thing I just wanted to pick out on is just the fact that this was probably a really good rendition of a dystopia without actually showing it. Like everything from how they acted, how they treated other people, how they stripped the freedoms of how they treated Wordsworth was basically a better dystopia than I've seen in many like blockbuster movies. Like I've seen some blockbuster movies and go like, it's a utopia, everything's wrong, and everyone's walking around with perfect hair and like nice nails, and everyone's got like VR headsets. Like I'm looking at you, Ready Player One. You are not a dystopia. Everyone's quite happy in their own little virtual world. But yeah, so I think that's like my bread is more like the concept and that line. So that is my bread.
Actually, so let me look this up. Fritz Weaver, the Chancellor, plays Kovat in Star Trek Deep Space Nine. It's the episode where I forget who was on trial. They're guilty. They show up guilty, and they know what the verdict is going to be, and that's the Cardassian state.
It's a hard time.
So maybe that's
on trial.
Okay. So maybe that's why it's stuck in the back of my head. When the three actors come up and deliver the verdict, obsolete.
Yeah.
There was no question what the verdict was going to be coming in, and so I thought, for the Star Trek fans, there's a parallel there.
Huzzah.
Oh yeah, he's the his O'Brien's lawyer who, when he gets told he won, he's they'll kill me. Yeah, guess what? Clearly they were watching this episode.
I mean, Cardassian State is kind of a little bit like this, isn't it? There's a lot of parallels between.
No, there's no little about it. It's just this.
Yeah.
I bet if we watch that episode, you'll see.
I think it'll be very clear.
Stolen from this episode.
Somewhere in the back room.
You don't cast that guy.
Before we go into the last 5 minutes, I want to talk about something real world here. So I'm going to get a little preachy, and if you want to tune out, I would encourage you not to. I want to talk about someone named Nex Benedict. They are a 16-year-old non-binary person who was killed this month. Sorry, I'm going to get a little emotional. In 2022, Oklahoma passed a law that requires students in public schools to use restrooms and locker rooms that match the sex on their birth certificate. And a couple months later, Nex started getting bullied at school because of their preference. They were born female, but they presented masculine traits. They were non-binary. February 7th, this month, there was a violent altercation in the girls' bathroom at their school. Next was attacked by 3 female students, sustained a serious head injury. Uh, Police were not contacted. Medical care was not notified. The school did suspend Nex for this. And Nex's parents, which are biologically their grandparents, who adopted them because Nex's parents didn't want them, they took Nex to the hospital for treatment. They were released the same day, but the next day they collapsed at home and were proclaimed dead at the hospital. Some stats and figures for you. During the first half of the 2022-2023 school year, PEN.org, a literature and human rights organization, cataloged 1,477 instances of individual books banned in schools. During the 6-month period, a quarter of the titles banned had LGBTQ plus characters or themes. A third of the unique titles banned were about race, racism, or features characters of color. In cases where books were temporarily banned, removed before they were read or investigated, 30% cover death and grief, 38% cover topics of health and well-being, 44% portray violence and abuse. And those sound to me like the sort of topics that I think Nex might have sought out. In the U.S., in the last 2 months alone, just January, February, 44 pending bills across 19 states dealing with banning or restricting teaching material. And I wanted to summarize a couple of them. In Alabama, prohibiting public kindergarten through grade 12 schools from offering any instruction related to gender identity or sexual orientation. In Nex's state of Oklahoma, prohibits public K through 12 schools from offering any instruction related to gender identity, except as part of a unit on HIV or AIDS. This instruction must present gender identity and gender expression as male, female, binary only, which Nex was not. And in the United States, since 2023, 353 bills of the same nature have been proposed. This is not 65-year-old fantasy literature. This is happening right now. And there's repercussions for suppressing literature. I want to wrap this up before I totally lose it with a quote from Rod Serling. "We're developing a new citizenry, one that will be very selective about cereals and automobiles, but won't be able to think." That is so prescient. I mean, this episode deals with banning material, and it doesn't matter really what material is banned because the end result is the same. We're channeling narrower thought. We're suppressing ideas, and never good. So, and now we can go into our last 5 minutes.
Well,
No, we're not going anywhere yet. We're not going anywhere yet because we have something to say. So first of all, thank you, Otto, for sharing something so personal to you. It's personal to me too. We have these conversations on a weekly basis, which is very unfortunate in my household. My wife is fighting that fight right now. And I'll say one thing: it doesn't take a chancellor or a totalitarian state to drive these changes, and it's even more insidious in a democracy. Sometimes where we feel like we have some measure of power, and we do a great deal more than other countries and other people. But some of it's an illusion. I'll talk real briefly before I turn it over to you, Stars, about I can't get too specific, because of our large viewership here. But there are some recent high-profile examples of very specific books that are being shared in certain circles, social media circles, and what the result has been at my wife's library has been, under the guise of a joke, students, kids, coming in and either defacing or removing or destroying copies of books that have been shared on a list that have been handed down. Them becoming instruments of somebody else's censorship. And even more terrifying has been incidences of teachers coming in and browsing shelves for books and not to take them out, but just to get titles. You know, the idea that we've had discussions about a lot of high profile topics on past episodes, but this one really hits home in a very unique way for me. So you know, I appreciate the opportunity to talk about that briefly. Stars, I'd like you to let you have your piece here.
Yeah, so I actually have some personal experience with this regard, because so this building that I live in right now, it wasn't always a housing cooperative. It used to be a center for gay and LGBT youth and education, like back in I believe the 60s or 70s, and then it got converted. And just recently, there was a request made to us by a local history group. I believe they're called the Pink Fairies, who basically they go around and they put up plaques commemorating various bits of local LGBT history. It's literally just a plaque saying this place used to exist here, as a way of saying these physical places are related to history. Just a small immortalization. They would pay for it. It wouldn't have anything to do with us. And the only reason I heard about this is because a person who lives three floors up from me said, I don't want that plaque to be put on this building because the idea of gay people coming to see this plaque and examine part of their local history would make my children unsafe.
For fuck's sake.
And I would be worried about their personal safety. To which I wanted to go upstairs, knock on her door, and ask her, do you feel unsafe now? I'm right here. Do you want to have this conversation? What about me makes me unsafe? This is about commemoration of history. It's a plaque. It's a book. It's this. It's that. It's the smallest of things that only offend you because you have a narrow mind and you don't know how to conceptualize a world outside of it, and you can't understand people who don't exist within your binary. And that is horrifying for me, sad for you, and the fact that I have to have this conversation in my own fucking housing, I was fucking furious. And it's like, you always think, oh, things are better now. And it's like, yeah, in some ways they are, but they're not always. Like, there are always little pockets of resistance that if you don't fight back against them, if you don't nip them in the bud, if you do not assert yourself, you will find yourself regretting it, because give an inch, take a mile. And it really did just make me think of that quote that you pulled out, Otto, and asked me about. You know, it's a crime punishable by death to have this object, so it's the only possession that I have that has any value of all to me. And I had to think for myself, okay, what would that be for me? Because I don't know if I have anything quite like that. If I have a single possession I could point to as like a expression of my identity as a gay man. And I was thinking, well, I have on my computer, I have blog entries of when my boyfriend confessed his love to me. I guess that would be what would be in a state where that is punishable by death. Guess what? That would suddenly become the most valuable thing in the entire world. So, yeah, pretty prescient. That's all I've got to say.
I don't have anything half as eloquent as you three, but all I will say is people are dicks, and let's make sure that they know why.
Your heart's in the right place, Idle.
It's there, if not, yeah, express it. I am on board. Don't worry. Yeah, no, thank you for that, all three of you. That's you know, this is going to be a heavy episode, and obviously warnings.
By the way, I should have put this up front, but I promise it lightens up after this. This is probably one of the most pointed episodes. So
yeah,
yes.
Okay, let's go. Is it time? Have we made eloquent points? Are we going to have some more heartful? Can we lighten up now?
There's more coming. Don't worry.
Oh, we can't. Okay, let's do it. Let's last 5 minutes.
Well, if that's the best they could do, this should last about 5 minutes.
5 minutes. We will retrace our steps and figure out what's going on.
You've got 5 minutes. Do it.
Okay, last 5 minutes of this episode. Otto, do you want to take us away? I believe you have a little something.
No. I always go last because
Okay.
I have the luxury of knowing what I want to say. So
I'll do my last 5 minutes then. I would flip it on its head a little bit at the end and put perspectives as I think most of my last 5 minutes are literally like turning things on its head, and it already can't be a Truman Show thing like I'm so apt for doing, because it already is kind of the Truman Show anyway. So I can't put any more cameras and watch anyone. But I thought my last 5 minutes, it revealed that no bomb would go off, everything would be fine. You'd literally have the glorious leader curled up on the floor waiting to die, and then Wordsworth would actually be the real power behind the throne. He is actually the leader, and this has all been a test for the fake leader to say, hey, you failed, you're obsolete. You have not passed your honour to the state and everything. Kind of what does happen, but with the more kind of like, you brought Wordsworth in, this is an analysis on this is a test on your humanity in a way, and maybe have made it a bit more on those lines. Or maybe have him develop some humanity. Don't put him to death. He goes out into the wild, 1984 style, and, it starts indulging in all these reckless, carefree things that the state forbids, and, ends on him, like, finding out what humanity is. Maybe that might be my last 5 minutes. Stars.
Yeah, I like that, because Burgess is so expressive and earnest, and everything I see, I believe what he's saying. That he's in another episode. Actually, I think it's going to be the next one we watch. The next episode of Twilight Zone. He makes a comment that's kind of derogatory, and it caught me so off guard. I'm like, whoa, why is my hero Burgess Meredith saying something not nice? So. For him to be the twist, of course he could pull it off dramatically, but like for him to be the leader, that would really be powerful, I think.
It's tricky. I think if I was going to do it, I'd probably go for a similar style reveal of guess what, there's no bomb. But instead he opens up the door and you have the assassin standing there, and he's like, oh, I have, so what's the nature of request of your assassination actually then? Oh, well, the assassin comes here and he kills anyone who's in the room. And then you just, instead of the final 5 minutes, the scene with the chance of being torn apart by your zombies, you just have like another person come in, maybe for another obsolescence. You've got the same kind of similar with another chancellor, but maybe it's the assassin for the murder of a state-sponsored citizen. Or maybe the assassin is there now as the vice chancellor. Like you could play with it in various different ways, just to like further accentuate how cruel and how unthinking and how just utterly unloyal a fascist state really is. How it's purely based on fear, and if you go out of line, this is what will happen to you. And there's no loyalty. There is no loyalty to the citizen. There is no loyalty to the state. It is a contract bound entirely by the threat of violence, and I feel like that'd be a decent way of underlining it. I feel like it's hard to improve on what Serling put forward, but I feel like that'd be a decent way of doing it. It kind of gets across the same themes.
Dan?
I can't. It's difficult to improve, so all I can do is offer an alternative. So this in Otto, you're alluding to what I think will be Burgess's other appearance, also related to books, and I think that this episode appears after that classic episode, Time Enough at Last. So I think in the last 5 minutes we find that Burgess Meredith's character is actually the same character. So this totalitarian regime has risen up from the ashes of whatever apocalypse had happened at the end of Time Enough at Last.
And he's immortal.
The name Wordsworth was given to him ironically. It's a pseudonym or some sort of state-given name.
They definitely
referring
to
his.
Don't they? Like Wordsworth, librarian, ironic.
Mr. Wordsworth.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah. Referring to his just like Smith or Cooper refers to the profession of the person, and so we find out at the end he really is Mr. Bemis from the original episode. It's not an improvement; it's just a neat little twist.
It'd be fun. It'd be cute.
I think fans of the Twilight Zone would adore that, though. Yeah. All right, so for my last 5, I scripted something because I like this episode, and it's something new, and it's a twist befitting Rod, I guess, that, whatever. I'm up my own butt on this. All right, my helpers are Dan as Burgess as Wordsworth, and stage directions by Captain Idle, so continue when ready.
The Chancellor has come to visit Wordsworth. They've talked for a while.
So, aren't you curious about my method of extinguishment?
Well, now that you ask, it isn't very often that the guilty die in a manner not known to me.
Worry not, Chancellor. The next few minutes should bring great pleasure to you, to the state, to everyone watching right now, in fact.
Wordsworth fishes around in his breast pocket and tosses what he's retrieved to the Chancellor.
What are matches?
Yes, matches, Chancellor. You don't care very much for my books, do you?
Wordsworth gestures to the pile of books surrounding the two men.
Your books are a lie, Mr. Wordsworth. They're a hoax, a falsity penned by small men, hoping to lead astray other small men.
Do you represent these other men? Do you speak for them?
I represent a constituency that doesn't want that filth. We are a religious state, and we are going to fight to keep that filth out of here because we are a Christian state. We are a moral state.
In fact, you hate my books, don't you, Chancellor?
I hate you, Mr. Wordsworth, and every man like you that drags our great society backwards. Under a cloak of compassion, you advocate burdening the state with repugnant undesirables, and your venomous books would presume to teach our sons and our daughters the sickening notion of nonconformity, the gender deviants, the mentally deficient, all a blight one and the same.
Fine, Chancellor. Then here is your opportunity to erase this particular blight forever. You see, you are to be my executioner, and the executioner of every illicit thought that resides in this room.
Gladly, Wordsworth.
With a sneer, the Chancellor retrieves a match and strikes it against the box. As he walks around, lighting the corners of pages and books, Wordsworth begins to read from Walt Whitman.
The man's body is sacred, and the woman's body is sacred. No matter who it is sacred. Is it the meanest one in the laborer's gang? Is it one of the dull-faced immigrants just landed on the wharf? Each belongs here, or anywhere, just as much as the well-off, just as much as you. Each has his or her place in the procession.
The Chancellor regards Wordsworth one last time.
Goodbye, Mr. Wordsworth. History will forget you very soon.
The Chancellor crosses the room and grabs the doorknob, finding it locked. He begins panicking and pounds the door on the door as Wordsworth continues reading. The flames engulf them both.
And scene. Thank you, gentlemen, by the way.
Thank you.
Pretty good Burgess Meredith. All right, so
Thank you.
I like the direct reference to book burning and the imagery of the Chancellor's hatred manifesting in flames. Now, in case anyone thinks my writing there is a bit melodramatic, first of all, you haven't watched the episode. Go watch The Obsolete Man. Secondly, some of the Chancellor's diatribe was a quote from 2 days ago. Words spoken by Tom Woods, the senator of Oklahoma, the state where Nex was killed. He said this about LGBTQ people when asked about Nex's murder. Quote, I represent a constituency that doesn't want that filth in Oklahoma. We are a religious state, and we're going to fight to keep that filth out of the state of Oklahoma because we're a Christian state. We are a moral state. On the audio recording, you can hear people clapping and saying amen to that.
Thank you for I was going to mention Fahrenheit 451 at a number of points, but I'm glad you included it in your one act. So thank you for that.
Still not read that. I should read that one. One of the few dystopias I've not.
You should.
Yeah.
Read a book instead of burning one.
Yes, indeed, yes. Or I'll just watch the film with, what's his name? No, I'm just going to...
Your brain is doing wonderfully tonight.
It's great, isn't it? It's so good. Anyway.
This episode's kind of thrown us all for a loop.
A little bit, yeah, a little bit. Okay. I think it's time to lighten up the room a little bit, and let's go to our...
I can show you my rating code.
Schiller rating 3.5. Associational rating norm -3. That's much too low a rating.
Much too low a rating.
Unsatisfactory rating on a member of my crew.
That's right,
Kirk gets me every time. That's much too low rating. I love that.
It's time for our rating criteria. Dan, it is your turn this week. What are we categorizing this this very striking episode of The Twilight Zone?
So, yeah, we will be rating out of 10, although the rating this week will be how many 12 angry kangaroo court zombies out of 10. A little confusing, but we can make it work.
I'm going to write this down so I don't screw it
up. I'll go first. I'm trying to think in my head what stops this being a 10, and I think it doesn't quite achieve that. it does get a very high 9, and I'm just trying to work out where it sits there. I think the bit we haven't talked about is the 12 angry kangaroo court zombies, because that bit at the end was a bit like, okay, what are they doing here? This is very strange. Like, they're almost like a little bit West Side
Well, it's a turn
Story.
towards realistic. Yeah.
Yeah, it was a little bit. It wasn't, I was expecting him just to be marched out the room and, duly gassed, but it was very strange. It was
Jeez, I know.
sorry. It's a fascist state. Let's not go there.
Sure.
That was a bit weird to me, but the rest of the episode was a real thinker. Yeah, obviously, like you say, the sets were made out of string and old shoes and boxes made to look like books. But I'm not going to put that too much against it because it's the Twilight Zone. I feel like that worked in its favor. I'm probably going to give this a strong 9.5. If it wasn't for the 9.5 12 angry kangaroo court zombies, who I think lost 0.5 for just being really strange at the end there. But apart from that, this was such a good episode. It was such a thinker. It was direct, but I think that worked for it. It hooked you. It had dystopian vibes and actually showed a good dystopia without just telling you it's a dystopia, but everyone's actually really happy all the time. And yeah, this was great. This is a moral lesson. This is, if my children are ever in the right mood and the right frame of mind to sit, and I want to sit them down in front and go, just look at this. You don't have to read 1984 if you just watch this. It's the same thing in 25
Your
minutes.
shortcut.
At least not until the 9th grade, but
Exactly.
yeah.
Go Dan.
So my pre-rating was a 9. I think that's where I'm gonna let my official rating rest. There were a few things. The scene at the end was certainly iconic, but the murmuring of the wide-eyed zombies was a little bit much for me. I felt there was a really big missed opportunity when they blew up Wordsworth's apartment, not to just throw a whole bunch of books on top of the Chancellor. You talked about really driving the point home. Just being buried by books would have been fantastic there. But again, this really read more as a radio play, and while there are certainly some striking visuals, again, interesting the difference between Wordsworth's apartment and then the I guess we'll call it the courtroom, where there's a complete absence of any books. There's no shelves in the background. You think about the judge's chambers. Whenever Judge Wapner retreats to his chambers and it's just walls of books everywhere, right? So nothing like that here. In fact, I think there was just like a little bit of paperwork at the top of the podium. That's all we got. There are some memorable images, but if I close my eyes and listen to this episode, I think I may actually have taken away more than I did watching it. So I appreciate the ideas and the presentation, but it still rests at a 9 for me. 12 angry kangaroo court zombies.
Stars.
Honestly, I'm probably going to give this 10 12 angry kangaroo court zombies out of 10, because okay, so here's the thing. You guys don't like the weird fascist zombie things, and I get that. It is definitely a turn toward the surrealistic. That being said, I feel like as just the entire thing is so unsubtle. The entire thing is just so incredibly direct. It is Rod Serling opening the script and going, "This is what fascism looks like. Do you like it?" And I feel like it's just a natural extension of the rest of because fascism is a ridiculous ideology. Fascism doesn't work long term, and the only reason it works short term is because you kill everything that doesn't agree with it. So, like, the idea that it looks ridiculous when you see it played out in person, yes, it does. Like, because fascism is ridiculous. It's inherently not how human beings are meant to work. And that's why I feel like it was jarring, because you've spent 24 minutes of this very measured, very eloquent and intelligent debate between the Chancellor and the librarian. And then you remember, oh yeah, this isn't what this state is actually like. This is one man having power for about 24 minutes. The rest of this world looks like this, and it's one man being torn apart by a horde of zombies. And it's like, that's what fascism is like. So I'm fine with that. And I feel like in terms of just being... I don't know, I just respect the starkness of it. It's like, it's in black and white. It literally couldn't be more obvious if it tried. It is just as uniquely human as it is obviously human. It's a case of like, it's the most specific thing, but also the least specific thing, because it's like everyone can understand what this is about. Yeah, there may be a language barrier. Yeah, there may be specificities about the Bible that people wouldn't translate, but I feel like you could show this to anyone and they'd get the point. And I feel like that's ultimately what that's what it wants to do. I can't think of anything I would actually really change about this that wouldn't diminish it in some way. So, yeah, a 10, 12 angry kangaroo court zombies out of 10 for me.
I wonder if you showed this to those people that were chanting and cheering at that Oklahoma rally, whether they'd completely missed the point, despite how obvious.
Oh, they would.
Yeah,
they would.
See that you just reminded me of quotable Shia. He said someone's bag on a stream. Bigots aren't clever. So, they're not really the target of pieces like this. But even if they were to sit down and watch it, they would get it too. So. Yeah, the first, like I said, the first time I watched this, it took up like a quarter of my laptop. I was doing something else at the time. But Burgess, gotta watch Burgess. I love Burgess. So I threw it in the list and I put may skip in parentheses. And so like a week ago, I realized this one was coming up and I wanted to rewatch it. I knew I didn't have a good handle on it, and so I feel kind of guilty cheating because I get to prep ahead of time and you guys don't, but not really. So I watched it and it grabbed me and it took me down the rabbit hole. And obviously, as you can see from this review, it's left, as Rod said, the ripping boot imprint on my life. And if the lighting was better and if the script was a little snappier, would that really change how much it affected me? No, it wouldn't. So it's a 10. I had the same thought too. It's like that, not as a joke, but does Rod legitimately not understand subtext, or does he just not like it? And I almost believed for a second that there was no difference. And then you hear an elected official in real life in 2024 stealing a line of script from this guy, and it's like, no, it's not unsubtle, it's realistic, sadly. So it's 10, 12 angry kangaroo court zombies out of 10.
And on that note, thank you, Otto, for showing. Oh yeah, we do have a finale, but thank you, Otto, for showing us this episode, because it has been I love the ones we can talk to death. We're a little bit on the same page on this, which is fine, but I do like the ones where we've got a lot to talk about, especially in real world circumstances, for something that's, God, how old is this? This is like 50, 60 years old.
Well, it's 63.
Yeah,
63.
Exactly, and it's still
63,
relevant today.
63.
The dawn of, in the dawn of television, essentially, in the early first 20, 30 years of television, and it's still relevant, and probably, unfortunately, will still be relevant for so long time. So thank you for that, Otto. This is kind of shows how far we've gone, yet how little we've progressed. So, but anyway, and now you talk. You had something to say? Sorry.
Yes.
Go on.
Oh, well, I thought you were going to throw it to me for... I finally had a chance to script it next week on
Okay,
Twilight
sorry.
Zone,
Oh,
so...
yes, that's right. Okay, it's fine. I'm going to be editing the shit out of this anyway, so...
Professional.
I forgot about that. It's been emotional. Also, what have you got to watch? You throw me right off now. Also, what have you got for us next time on the Holodeck?
Next time on the Twilight Zone, Dennis the Menace is all grown up, and his nose for news is here to save a small-town courier from bankruptcy. We enlist the considerable talents of Burgess Meredith and Robert Sterling with a story by Charles Beaumont called Printer's Devil. And I bet you credits to Navy Beans you'll be in suspense right up until, well, you'll just have to read it in the papers. Good night.
And good night. We'll see you next time.